Hello, welcome everyone. We'll have one more representative from civil society joining us shortly, but we'll get going. And I see many coming in, so I'll give you just 20 seconds to take a seat. And while others come in, I just want to sincerely thank you all for being here, and I mean it. There's a lot going on, and I think for you taking the time here to hear the voices of civil society and their concerns is very, very much appreciated, because the world needs to know about what's going on here. So thank you. So we have here, and we're complete. The team is complete. So we are here to sound the alarm about the slow pace of the negotiations. I think we all know that without an ambitious global agreement on nature here at COP15, we will not halt. We have no chance to halt and reverse nature loss. And really important, on top of that, I think we will not be able to achieve the Paris Agreement. So I'm here with 4 representatives from civil society that will share with you their concerns and the importance that the world knows we need to keep up the pressure to make progress. Each one of you has 4 minutes, and then we'll come to you for questions. I will start with myself. I'm Patrick Frick from the Global Commons Alliance, and the Global Commons Alliance is a large network of organizations that teams up to safeguard our global commons, all the Earth systems we need to protect our life on Earth. Marco Lambertini, to my left, is the Secretary General of WWF. And Marco, you will provide us with an overview, the status of the negotiations, and why you are alarmed by where we are at. Over to you, Marco.
Patrick, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for joining in person here and online. First of all, as you just said, let me highlight that this press conference represents civil society coming together with NGOs from different sectors of society, as Patrick will introduce in a minute. But also, this is a very tiny representation of the large group of NGOs, more than 350, from development, humanitarian, indigenous, faith, youth, environment, business platforms that are supporting strong ambition, the ambition that we want to see in the GBF, halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 to build a nature-positive future. I think it is important that we all remember why we are here in Montreal. We are here in Montreal because it's time for governments to agree on a strong and clear global biodiversity framework that is able to deal with the dangerous, accelerating loss of nature and biodiversity. As dangerous as climate change, and in fact interconnected, because now we know very clearly that we won't be able to keep 1.5 alive if we don't also preserve the ability of nature to sequester and store carbon. Some figures are staggering. The forests of the world are today storing the equivalent of 100 years of CO2 human-induced emissions at the current levels. So imagine if we unleash that carbon from the natural system. Not a chance for us. It's time for the negotiators here in Montreal to spend time on to stop spending time on technical issues and focus on what really needs to be achieved. We see slow progress, a lot of focus on things which are losing time at a time when actually time is not available. It's a rare commodity here. And we are fast approaching what should be the conclusion of the adoption of the agreement. We need an agreement that commits the world to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 to achieve a nature-positive world, and also agreeing on the necessary goals, targets, resource mobilization, and other means of implementation able to deliver that ambition. Ambition that today is not clear for nature and needs to be clarified at this COP. Science is super clear. They were already living outside planetary boundaries when it comes to biodiversity. and that the loss of species and ecosystems can lead to catastrophic tipping points for entire ecosystem like coral reef or ecoregions like the Amazon forest. And as the UN Secretary General said in the opening speech, this is humanity's suicide by proxy, a very strong word from him. We're here to remind governments and delegation, the negotiators, that many of the leaders have also already pledged action on nature at a very ambitious level. More than 90 world leaders, including the President of the European Union, have endorsed the leaders' pledge for nature, committing to secure an ambitious biodiversity agreement capable of reversing nature loss by 2030. This has been done publicly already years ago and repeated in the lead up to this COP15. So commitments are out there. Now it's time to translate them into a strong GBF. And also remind everyone in the negotiating room that the business sector, the investment sector, is all equally asking for clarity on nature, for a level playing field, and for a global goal they want and they can contribute towards. We saw a disappointing result in COP27. This makes success in Montreal even more important because without action to reverse loss of nature by 2030, we will have no chance to combating the climate change and securing a 1.5 world. This should concentrate all the minds of the negotiators during these final days. But what we have seen is quite the opposite. They're still skirting and not reaching conclusion on the main issues. That's very dangerous, disappointing. While we are seeing the pace pick up elsewhere, negotiators are running the risk of not leaving enough time to secure convergence on key issues and elements on an ambitious biodiversity agreement. The longer we wait to address these issues, the higher is the risk that we won't have the time to really build the convergence around the right ambition. In conclusion, let me also say we are worried about attempts to dilute the ambition. It's not just a question of slow progress, it's also a question of attempts to dilute the ambition. And diluting the ambition with the global biodiversity framework would, on one hand, offer cover to the many vested interests benefiting from delaying action, maintaining today's business as usual, broken development model, which is failing both for people and the planet, and allowing for more loss of nature and biodiversity, exacerbating climate change, poverty, inequity, and undermining our ability to mitigate and adapt to climate change. We must focus on what is necessary. And not the lowest common denominator that can be negotiated here in the current geopolitically fractured world. Nature can bring us together, and that's what we expect at the end of the COP. People and nature cannot afford the failure at COP. Nature and our future cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Business as usual is specifically not helping the indigenous people. So I'm just going to go to Hindu Umaru Ibrahim. She's the president of the Association for Women and Peoples of Chad, and you will speak up for the rights and protection of indigenous people and why it is important we need to have an ambitious framework in place at the end of next week. Hindu.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I'm in total agreement with what Marco said here. As an African indigenous woman, I travel from very far with many other indigenous peoples that come across the world. We afford a different climate from the hot weather to the cold weather. Expecting that we are going to have a high ambitions after this more than 2 years of time they get for the negotiations. And coming here, seeing that we still have like 800 brackets, seriously. What did they do since the last years? Did they use their time efficiently in Geneva, here in Montreal, and also in Nairobi? Or did they use their time to just like go as holiday from one country to another one, increasing the greenhouse gases? That was the questions we are asking ourselves. So having an ambitious biodiversity outcome here is not a negotiable. It has to be a reality because all the world are facing the biodiversity loss. Indigenous peoples are facing the most one, because for us, the biodiversity is not the subsidy, it is our home. We cannot accept losing our home. We saw what's happening in the COP28 with the climate change, where we have all the private sectors, the fossil fuel organization, more than 600. And when I see just the numbers before I come here, there is more than 1.8 trillions that investing to harm nature. And we have just less than 90 billions that is put it for the conservations. The huge gap is not acceptable. So investing in destroying our nature must be stopped, and it has to be in the decision text. And the money have to be direct accessing to the indigenous peoples who are protecting the nature without getting paid for it. And we know there is money. When they have 1.8 trillions, that means there is money. They must do these transitions here. And this is about the target 18 and the 19 they are discussing here. So what indigenous peoples want, we have the discussion on the Article 8G. And in that discussions must have the full and effective participation of the indigenous peoples, not as the stakeholder, but as right holders to take the decisions over our land, territories, resources, that they are talking about it as a commodities. We are not a commodities, we are not a substitute. We are a solutions that can help to restore the biodiversity, and that need to be in the decision text. And we wanted to have our participations to be also considered in all the different targets. We put in the targets, we wanted the recognition of the indigenous territories. And when we mean by territories, is of the land and also the oceans, fresh lands, and all the rest of the ecosystems that need to be recognized, not later by 2030. 100% of our land must be recognized. And our land must be conserved, and the investment must be put it in the indigenous communities directly in order to conserve those land. Marco said very well, if we want to end all the threat on the environment, especially the climate change, we must protect nature. Nature play a big role, and we are nature. We are not different than nature. So indigenous peoples wanted to see all that into the decision text in a very urgent manner. We cannot accept the ministers come and again start in the process and substance who are lacking of the leadership. That what we saw. The leadership is lacking. If you went to the room, you can see there is no guidance in which documents, there is no guidance in who is going to run it. So the ministers must be ready by the 15th to take it over and come up with a great outcome that we are waiting for them.
Thank you, Hindu. I have to my right side Joseph Onoya. He's the Director General of the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. So just building on Hindu's call for the inclusion of indigenous people to make the framework count on the ground, I would like to invite you to speak up for the need that this framework will be implemented and lead to action on the ground. Joseph.
All right, thank you very much. As Patrick rightly pointed out, I'm Joseph Onoja, and I'm from Nigerian Conservation Foundation, a BirdLife international partner in Nigeria. We act on the ground. Without a framework that we can actually have actions on the ground, then what we are doing is just playing to the gallery. We need an ambition, and not just an ambition, but an implementable one, that we'll be able to see all of the things that we've been talking about to have the effect that we want them to have. Building up on what my previous speakers have said, we don't have the time. Now is the time to act, because we are 2 years behind schedule. And that 2 years is according to our own time, not according to nature's time. Because if we have post-2020, we are in 2022. So we have just 8 years left. And that 8 years is according to our time, as I said. Nature is beckoning on us to act, and we need to have something on the ground that will make us to act. When we go to people on the ground, their livelihoods are very important. We talk about nature conservation. We are also talking about human life conservation. And we need to look at it from that angle as well. People's lives are involved in this. People's lives are intertwined with nature. So we shouldn't be looking at ourselves as if we are apart from nature. We are part of this nature, and especially the communities that are in this front line. They are looking up to us, just like Hindu said, to act. And we are hoping that the negotiators and then the ministers will come up and give us something that we can work with. And at the end of the day, we don't want an agreement that will be hanging up in the air. We want something that is implementable, something that that we can act on it on the ground, and something that we can act on it now. And I'm calling on the negotiators to speed up because we do not have time. We've been here for some days now. We've not seen anything concrete, and we need to see it before the ministers come. And if it happens that we have to continue like this until the ministers come, we want the ministers to ensure that they do what is right. History is beckoning on all of us, and especially on the leaders, to be able to act. Because we are going to remember this day, that someday in the year 2022 in Montreal, some group of people came together to decide the future of nature, the future of people, and the future of the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. You say we don't have time.
We don't have time.
And one reason is, and I'll introduce you to Aisha Siddiqa, a Pakistani environmental justice advocate, who to speak better and raise the voice for actually giving us a story from on the ground that actually people are hurting now. Over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Aisha, and this is my fifth conference of the year, and frankly, I am exhausted. I've spent the last 5 years of my youth, what people call their golden years, advocating for climate and for nature. And I come to an event like this, and the greenwashing here is absolutely horrifying. The fact that corporations are running this conference and that we are letting them run this conference rampant is horrifying. The fact that the greenwashing is being taken and activist language and the language that young people, indigenous peoples, and those who are facing the reality of the climate crisis, and the fact that it's being co-opted to offer green solutions, again, is horrifying. You cannot negotiate with nature. I don't know how many years, how many panels, how many conferences it's going to take to realize this. You can sit in your boardrooms and you can say random numbers. By this year, we're going to reduce this many percentage of offsets and we're going to protect this much biodiversity, et cetera, but there will come a time, and it's very close, when you will not be able to negotiate with nature, because the thing about nature is it is powerful, more powerful than all of us. And no one can tell you that better than the people of Pakistan. When floods come, they accumulate in crises. My country, 1/3 of it was underwater, 30 million people were displaced. That crisis then flooded into a healthcare crisis, and that crisis became a domestic violence crisis, and now it's a women's issue. And how are these all connected with biodiversity? If we keep emitting carbon at the level we are, if we keep allowing corporations, fossil fuel industry, big agriculture, big pharma into spaces like this, we will lose biodiversity. And no amount of offsetting biodiversity will make up for the loss of species. You cannot plant trees somewhere else after you've destroyed nature in one place. How many years will it take for us to figure that out? And so, what my call, first of all, is for us to be honest, because who are we lying to? Each other? The citizens of our nation states? Indigenous people, your children, who are you lying to? Because the thing about truth is it will always make itself apparent. Maybe it'll take 10 years, maybe it will take 20 years, maybe it will take 30 years. But the lies will eventually come out. And then we will be incredibly embarrassed. And then it will be too late. The second thing, human rights are inextricably linked to biodiversity protection and to preserving nature. You cannot omit the rights of indigenous people, those who protect the land, from the environment. Why are the human rights in brackets in these negotiations? Why are women, young people, and indigenous people not being considered as rights holders and being merged as stakeholders with corporations? We've been protecting nature before the global north even had the words. And we will continue doing it. And we've been doing it for free. And look how much we've been able to protect. Now, on the last leg of planet and nature crises, we are asking for financial support. And it is coming with offsets, it is coming with incorrect and false solutions. And on top of that, it is coming with the expense. And we are having to negotiate and compromise our morals and ethics. That is absolutely unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. We have, I would say, about 5 minutes for questions, and of course, representatives here on the panel will be available also outside if we don't get through all of them, but ready to take some from the floor here. All right. I saw your hand first, and then we go there.
Hi, thank you. Tetsuji from Kyoto News. My question to Aisha. What is the biggest greenwashing you found here?
Here. See, this is a complicated question. I'm going to answer with what I said earlier. You cannot offset biodiversity loss from one area and plant trees in another area. And if that is the angle with which we're trying to save nature, it's going to fail.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin O'Sullivan from the Irish Times. Could I ask Marco to be a little bit more specific on who's stalling negotiations, what countries, what's the problem in terms of making a breakthrough at this stage?
Look, it's not a question of naming and shaming individuals. It's a question of really highlighting the fact that there is not enough convergence of the key elements of the GBF that are going to make the GBF strong and able to address the initial crisis. We're not here to negotiate something that is achievable in the rooms of the negotiators. We're here to achieve something that is answering to the question and the imperative of halting and reversing initial loss. Because we know that unless we do that, we will be paying a dear, dear price in so many different ways: food, water, climate, health, equity. So that's what we need to see, sir. We need to see a genuine commitment to achieve something that is fit for purpose and a serious plan to deal with the serious situation we're facing right now.
More questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. Janine Quiroz from Carbon Brief. I would like to ask you if you can tell us or give us any update on the ratchet mechanism, as well as if you can tell us about including the human rights for an healthy environment and the link to our health as humans.
All right, thank you. Ratchet McGill, what do you want to, who wants to take it? And then human rights, I go to Hindu and...
Look, I don't think we are there yet. I don't think we are unfortunately making the progress that we need to see on the implementation mechanism. It's a key element that need to be agreed in this conference. If you look on one hand at the mission, the clarity of the mission, halt and reverse nature loss for the nature positive future, and the implementation mechanisms are the two key pillars to make actually the agreement work. Even if we agree strongly on all the goals and targets in between, if you don't have a clear mission as a reference point, if you don't have a clear mechanism to implement it, it will be a teethless agreement. So we're not there at the conclusion on the ratcheting, but for us is absolutely a critical part of a successful GBF.
Thank you, Marco. So there's a question between the link between human rights and biodiversity protection. Hindu, Aisha, who wants to take it? You want to go first? Yeah, and then over to you.
Yeah, so the language on human rights, as you know, in the last text that we have in Nairobi, we have the human right language, and including like right to health. Because, and it's more obvious after COVID that we have to put right to health into the biodiversity framework in order to protect our health, as we already have it also in the climate change, like health is part of it. So, but it's still, as Aisha said earlier, in the bracket, like why you just ignoring what is happening to you also. So we need to unbracket the human right languages. So when you have indigenous people rights, human rights, right to health, so those are not the issue that can be in the bracket, and those are not the issue to be like in discussions from developed or developing, north or south. It is touching everyone. So that's what we are expecting maybe to work.
We have about 1 minute, and then we need to
Okay,
leave.
I'm going to give you a clear example. During the flooding in Pakistan, which killed a mass amount of biodiversity and displaced people, the flooding then led to around 650,000 women giving birth in flood zones. It is a healthcare crisis. And during the flood zone birth givings, women did not have enough hemoglobin to give birth to their children, and their children did not have enough hemoglobin. They died. We had mass death. And the frontline workers were no longer firefighters or people getting people out. It was the doctors. It is a healthcare crisis fundamentally. And for indigenous peoples, even renewable energies or planting new biodiversity, if you are going into people's lands, taking it and displacing them and kicking them out, it is violation of their rights. And we cannot have that.
Thank you. Yes, Joseph, and then
May
just
I
briefly.
give a very graphic illustration of how these are intertwined, especially when it comes to health. When there was a flooding in Nigeria, corpses were exhumed from the graves. That is how far I can paint it. Imagine corpses being exhumed from the graves and moving around in floodwaters and people around it. Imagine the health crisis.
Marco, just 20 seconds to
20
close us
seconds,
off.
just to remind one thing. This is an opportunity for governments to stay on the right side of history. This is the opportunity to really start and agreeing on a plan that rebalances the relationship with nature. For all the reasons that you heard in the panel, for all the reasons that you heard in reports and science and scientific assessments, this is become a security issue for humanity. It's not just an ecological issue in isolation. And COP15 has to deliver, or else the alternatives that will continue to sleepwalk into, as the Secretary General said, suicide by proxy. And that cannot be allowed at this conference. And so, halt and reverse nature loss, nature positive, with all the elements of the goals and targets and a strong implementation mechanism, human rights, and the resource mobilization needed for the South to implement the GBF is the minimum that we need to see at the end of the week.
Just want to thank all of you again for being here, hearing those voices, and hopefully you can carry them out. It's important. We have no time to waste. So thank you so much for being here.